This video is intended to supplement an understanding of the Scudder reading that we had for class. Please don't use it as an alternative for actually reading the article. You want to come to it after having read the article, maybe after having had our discussion in class, so that you get a good understanding of it, so that when you're ready for the quiz and then the test, and even the assignment, that you're ready to do it well. Samuel Scudder is a great reading, and it's taught across the country, as I mentioned in class, so frequently, because the lesson in it is almost universal, and it's something that, frankly, we've kind of lost as a culture. I have this big observation, all these arrows, what does it mean? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of this little prezi here to try and get into this business of observation. So here we are. You think of Samuel Scudder, he's taking a look at that fish. He's studying an object that's not in his field of study. Agassiz is frustrated a little bit by leaving him to his own devices. After 10 minutes, he thinks he's seen it all. Who hasn't had that feeling? They've taken a look at something, such as a video for class, and they think they've seen it all after the first 5 seconds. Well, Scudder is probably even a little bit more patient, and yet he takes a look at that fish and he thinks he's seen it all after 10 minutes, and that he's done, and should be done with the project. Isn't he done with it and can move on? He thinks, as far as Agassiz is concerned, his teacher should come back and he should assign him a new assignment so he can get going here. And yet, Agassiz doesn't help him out very much, because he still has to look at the fish, and he wants to do a good job, and he's a student who thinks there's something here to learn, and he wants to impress his teacher. But beyond that, he starts to learn some other things. How bored he can get, for example. Half hour after half hour passes, he says the fish looks loathsome, and he starts to become so bored he wonders whether he can learn anything at all. And that's why I've drawn this little arrow going to the right here that's horizontal. The idea being that his learning really plateaus out. If he's curious, as I say up here on the left, he certainly starts to level out, maybe even dip, because he gets so bored in what he's doing. But the neat part about Scudder, as you probably no doubt guessed, is that he can overcome that boredom. Now this is part of his thesis, and that's why it's so important to actually physically see it in a little map of the reading, and also maybe even imagine it for yourself, because it could form the basis for a thesis for your papers. After lunch, Agassiz doesn't make an appearance, but then he starts to feel the teeth with his finger and counts the scales, and that's when he can get curious again. See how the arrow goes up? He starts learning things again, and so really what the arrows are meant to represent is this plateau of learning and plateau of interest. He gets more curious, or curiouser, after he discovers things through observing more closely and being imaginative with his observation. He can push beyond the boredom and discover more. And that's part of the purpose of this assignment, if you get into the spirit of things, that you're to discover something about yourself as you're observing and sitting and watching your place, that part of your observation is a discovery about what keeps you motivated, what can have you see more. He draws the fish. A pencil is one of the best eyes, his teacher tells him. And that doesn't mean his pencil actually has eyes in it, but that through drawing we can make the statement that he'll notice more because he has to get it right on paper. I tell students about the fine arts class in campus where the teacher will send the students out to actually draw physical parts of the campus that they'll have walked by hundreds of times if they're on campus for a semester. And the idea is that they'll notice things that they haven't noticed before. Well, his drawing of the fish is the same sort of premise. He'll notice things more, such as these details: fringed gill arches, movable operculum, pores in the head, fleshy lips, lidless eyes, lateral lines, spinous fins, forked tail, compressed and arched body. And let me tell you, probably didn't have that vocabulary when he started this assignment. If he did, I'd be surprised. Notice how, in observing more, he needs to actually observe things that he can't describe at first, but now through reflection and through his profession, he can describe and apply names to. And that's part of the discovery that's to be made here. You should, if you're doing the assignment right, reach a point where you don't know what it is that you're describing. You'll describe it only through the language that you have, and maybe not the specialized vocabulary of your profession or a person who really knows the place that they're observing. But he's still curious. He's noticing things about that fish, noticing things about himself, and his learning's advanced. It's gone up now since when he was so bored before. But then it starts to taper off, and again he'll hit a plateau. Agassiz tells him, "You have not looked very carefully." He's not telling him to be mean, but he's telling him because there's more to discover here. He says he's piqued, angered, and mortified. "I am certain I do not," he says, "but I see how little I saw before," he says in response to Agassiz. And this is the big discovery, at least in the middle of the article, that he's noticing what would be our little arrows here. He's noticing that his learning is tapered off, that he's learned more, that it's tapered off again, and he's expecting to learn more. That expectation is now starting to be built into him. He's observing that about himself. So to restate an important point here, he's learning about himself that if he can push through the boredom and help keep himself interested in a project, he'll actually have advanced much further than if he'd just given up. And that's the key point for you. If you hit a wall, or if you like, hit a plateau in what it is that you're observing, the assignment that it is that you're working on, the trick here, and it's no trick at all, it's something that successful people do, is to push beyond what makes you bored, push beyond the simple giving up. Because if we end with that arrow point and don't discover how our interest can be revived, then we miss something, we missed out on our own learning, and that's, we're missing part of what Scudder has learned from Agassiz, and really learned from himself because he's taught himself how to do this. Agassiz confirms with him that's next best, that you know what you don't know. You know that you haven't noticed everything. Aha! And he'll, what? Start to notice things even as he doesn't have the thing in front of him, that he sees the fish when he walks and when he sleeps. Ah! And then he'll even discover things that he hadn't noticed when the fish was directly in front of him. How many times do we put something on the back burner, so to speak, think about them when we don't think about them? And I know that sounds really paradoxical or contradictory, but it's true. We put something on the back burner, and yet we're still discovering things. In his case, he's discovering the things that he took for granted, the symmetrical sides, the paired organs. But then, of course, the learning will taper off again. And here we've got several steps along the way where he's revived his own interest in his subject. 3 long days of study progress, months and years pass, and he's still drawing the doggone fish. Notice where he started. He started and he was angry. He thought this was a waste of time. You've never studied subjects when you thought you were wasting your time, have you? Well, he did too. And yet now he says it's the best entomological lesson he ever learned. Not so much about ichthyology, but about entomology, the field that he was interested in. It's a discovery that he made outside of his field that was the best one inside of his field. A lesson whose influence has extended to the details of every subsequent study. I highlight this because here's a thesis, and I'll emphasize it in class and what makes up a thesis. It's a thesis about his learning, how he really learned to learn something about himself. Now, he's not going to learn through this method all the time, but this was pretty sophisticated and significant for his early learning. He picked up a way of seeing, not just about fish, but everything, right, that would help him for the rest of his studies, and he got it in part through Agassiz, and Agassiz's reluctance to just put the discoveries and what he was to look for out in front of him. It's a big difference, isn't it? It's not a laundry list of things that Agassiz is making him look for. It really is what he decides to discover about the fish for himself, what he decides through working past his boredom into true discovery. So this is the first part of his thesis. It's the best entomological lesson. Best, he says. Best lesson I learned, and it's not even in my field. He says it's a legacy. This lesson is that the professor has left to me, as he's left to so many others, of inestimable value. Can't put a price tag on it, which we could not buy and with which we cannot part. It's not something that you could just simply buy and then you get it and then it's done. It's not simply the case that you could buy it and get a worksheet and then you're all solve, or an app for a smartphone, and then you solve all the problems for you. It's not something that you can buy. You have to train yourself into it, and you have to be willing to be trained, if you want to think about it that way. And with which we cannot part. Boy, I hope we get to talk about this more in class. What is that meaning of not being able to part from the lesson that he's learned from Agassiz? These two parts form his main thesis. If you take a look at what we've talked about in class and videos on the subject, the thesis really represents the lesson of what the whole reading is about. There's nothing in the reading extraneous to this main point, because this is the thing that he's really heading to. It's at the top of the arrows. Sorry to make you dizzy with this. It's where he's headed. It's where he was headed, but he didn't know it at the beginning. Okay? That's kind of an important lesson, too. So think about that for a second. This is something that is built into him now. It's something that he pursues all of his subsequent studies with. And there's the lesson of Samuel Scudder.